Alrighty. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you here. Welcome to the LinkedIn. I can't even say the title of it correctly the first time. Welcome to the LinkedIn Lunch live stream. That's a lot of L's. LinkedIn Lunch live stream here at the Deverminter Dave YouTube channel. Welcome. This is the first lunch, I guess, lunch and learn type thing, but our first LinkedIn live stream, LinkedIn lunch. Man, I gotta rename this thing. I can't even say it correctly. The first LinkedIn lunch live stream for this series. So we're going to be testing this out a little bit. I know a lot of the people who generally are jumping on the Deep Pockets live stream on Saturdays are not able to come to this one or vice versa. So we're just trying to do some different things to provide some different content for different people. So hopefully, if the Saturday live stream doesn't work for you or isn't what you're looking for necessarily, this will hopefully be something that is a little bit more helpful for you or right down your alley a little bit more. So, and with it being in the middle of the day, for me, it's a little bit different. I'm going to actually take my headphones off because I feel really weird. I feel like I'm yelling. Somebody tell me if I'm yelling. It won't ding or anything, so I don't really need the headphones. I look weird with them too, so there you go. But welcome. If you're watching live, go ahead and say hello in the chat, and as always, certainly feel free to leave comments in there. If you're trying to get a hold of me and say something to me specifically, do at DevMentorDave or put some question marks or do something to catch attention, because if there's a lot of conversation or something going on, I may not see it right away. But thanks for jumping on here live. Glad to see you all. Looks like we've got Celestino and is it Epi? Is that the right way? Is that the correct pronunciation? Let me know if you're watching Epi and if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But welcome. If you don't know what we're doing, you just saw me go live. Let me explain really quickly what the LinkedIn Lunch live stream series is. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we're at 1 p.m. Central United States time, which is roughly my lunchtime. We're going to get on here for about an hour, and we're going to go through LinkedIn. Why LinkedIn? Well, LinkedIn is really the main social media that I use, especially professionally. I don't use Twitter really. I don't use Instagram or things like that. But it's also a place where you often see a lot of advice for junior devs, or a lot of helpful information, or information that's designed, hope to be helpful for junior developers. And what I wanted to do was kind of give you my opinion of things, because there's a lot of voices on LinkedIn and other pieces of social media that may be good, may not be good, that might have one perspective, and maybe there's another alternative perspective that could be helpful to you as well. So I want to take some time every Tuesday and Thursday just for about an hour and kind of go through different posts that I see on LinkedIn or articles that I see on LinkedIn, and just kind of read through those, go through those with you, and share my thoughts with those along the way. So as we do that, though, if you have somebody that you think that I should follow and potentially look at their posts and give my opinion, send me that information either here in the chat, or you can do it as a comment on this video later when it moves over to video form, or you can always join the DevMentor Dave Discord server, and there is a specific LinkedIn Lunch live stream channel in there that you can leave your comments on there as well. So if you have a specific article or some post in LinkedIn, or maybe it's just a person you think I should follow to see more information, send that over to me, because I'd love to get suggestions. I'm currently working on adding, people that I'm following through this other LinkedIn profile. And so I'm working on building that up, trying to do it as much as I can around the content that's specifically for junior developers, because I want to look at that type of content. So what we're going to do is take a look at a few things today and kind of get into the flow of what we're doing. As always, if you have questions, if you have comments about what we're reading or what I'm saying, certainly feel free to throw those in the chat, and I'd love to take a look at those as we go through. We will have a hard stop right at 2 or maybe even slightly before, just because I need to actually work as well because I have a real job. So we're just taking the lunch hour to kind of do some stuff that hopefully will be helpful to you, and we'll see how successful this is, how helpful it is to you all as we go along the way. Certainly feel free to leave your comments, whether you find it helpful or not helpful, and we'll see what we can do to try to make this as beneficial as possible. But every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Central U.S. time, and we'll be on here doing this or something else. So, all right, let's jump into the LinkedIn. So I set up another LinkedIn profile that's not my normal profile. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, do not try to connect to this profile. Try to connect to the profile that's in my About Me information on the YouTube channel. So if you want to connect with me there. Don't try to connect with me on this one. Okay, so let's pull this up. There we go. Okay, I did go ahead and found a few things that I thought might be interesting to take a look at. I have not read every word of all of these posts, partially because I want to be able to like actually respond to them somewhat live. This one here, this first one we'll look at is just kind of in the feed, and then I've got several others that we'll pull up and take a look at. Hopefully this is easy for you guys to read. If you need me to increase the size or do anything like that, let me know in the chat, and I'll try to do that better moving forward. I think this is probably big enough for you guys to see though, so but let me know either way. All right, so again, I'm following just a lot of different voices and people trying to get in the mode of a junior developer, and this is one that just kind of popped up. You're going to see information from developers. You're going to see information from recruiters, information from coaches of different kinds, things like that. There's going to be lots of different types of voices. And that's something to keep in mind as you're looking at information on LinkedIn. You want to make sure you understand where the person's coming from, because a lot of times that will determine their perspective around what they're posting too. So there may be something that I would disagree with based on my perspective and my experience, but it still may be good advice based on their experience and what they've learned and experienced throughout their career and their different perspectives. So take what I have to say with a grain of salt, take what they have to say with a grain of salt, and you'll probably do pretty well. Celestina, before we jump in here, to be active on LinkedIn is said to be very important for junior devs. What's your take on this? I would say yes and no. I think it's important. We're going to get to a question here about networking in a minute, but I think it is very important for networking. I think it's important. You know, I see a lot of people telling junior devs to be posting on LinkedIn often. Honestly, as a developer and as a content creator and as a hiring person, that doesn't do anything for me. But I also am not in a position where I'm hiring junior devs right now, so that could be part of it. But I think it's good to get familiar with LinkedIn, to be able to get advice from LinkedIn. There's tons and tons of content creators on LinkedIn that are very, very helpful. And we're going to see that, you know, each time we get on LinkedIn. Again, one of the reasons why I wanted to do LinkedIn is because you're going to constantly be getting fresh takes, right? You're going to constantly be getting new ideas, new posts, new ways of saying things. And so I wanted to use something like this to kind of give us the springboard and the content to move forward. So I would say absolutely get on LinkedIn. Would I spend like most of my time on there? No. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really there for networking. It's not there for necessarily helping you grow. There, like I said, there's a lot of good content on there, but at the end of the day, if you're going to be a great dev, you have to work on the dev side. Networking is important, but you've got to have something good to give to the people you're networking with. So I would say yes, it's important, but keep it in balance. And focus more on growing yourself and your knowledge in your career. So but this can be helpful for that. So, and we'll see that as we go through. This one just caught my eye right before I jumped on here, though. So, it says entry-level positions should require 0 years of experience. It is an interesting phenomenon that there are a lot of companies that are putting up entry-level positions that are that require like 3 years of experience, and I don't know. I've got a friend who's an engineer, a regular engineer, and at his job, when you come in, even if you, no matter what school you went to as an engineer, when you come in, it's going to take you at least 2 years to get up to speed with how they do things and what they're doing in their job. And that's not even software development. That's a different type of engineering, which I won't go into for their sake. But you have to remember that if you're saying this is an entry-level position, you should expect people to come in with no experience. And unfortunately, we're seeing that a lot in this current market. A lot of companies trying to get people with experience basically at an entry-level pay is what they're really looking for. That's how they should say it. It's entry-level pay positions, but 3 years of experience. That just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it really is a catch-22 here, right? It says, let's ditch a catch-22 scenario and give everyone a shot at the starting line. Because, again, it is a starting line, right? It's a place, it's an entry-level position. And for a lot of junior developers, you don't know how much you can really apply to those things, even though it says entry-level, because you don't know if you have the skill set. There are junior developers who have been junior developers for multiple years and probably would qualify for one of those entry-level positions, but they still get scared because it's not professional experience, because they want 3 years of professional experience. So I do love this, how she says, sometimes the best qualifications are hunger, passion, and a fire to prove oneself. And obviously there's lots of things that you need outside of that list. You need to have knowledge, you need to have experience, you need to have an understanding of development and things like that. You have to have the technical aspects, but this is the thing for me really that is not just about junior devs, but about all developers. When I interview someone, I want to know that they are somebody who has a hunger and a passion to learn, that they want to grow, that they want to get better, that they want to constantly stay up to date with things that are new. Now, you can't stay up to date with everything new, but that's what I want to see, not just in a junior dev, but even a senior level dev. Excuse me, I want to see passion. I want to see hunger. I want to see them reaching out for things that might be difficult. I want to see them trying new stuff. I don't want to just see somebody who's just doing the same thing over and over and over again, because again, development is a very fast moving process. It's constantly changing, and so you have to have a hunger and a passion and a desire to change with it and to grow with it if you're going to be successful. So hopefully more companies will heed this type of call to them to actually do things that make sense. But I know right now a lot of junior developers are facing this specific catch-22 scenario. So if you are one, I feel sorry for you, but this advice really is in my opinion good advice. Oh, that's what happens when you click the update button, and we lost it. That's gonna be fun. All right, so let's jump to the next one here. This one won't change pages. I think I saw somebody. Life of Dan. I think part of the issue is the industry bestowing the title of senior far too early. 3 years of development shouldn't move you straight to senior. I absolutely agree with you, Dan. I'll just call you Dan. I absolutely agree with you. Unfortunately, there's some arbitrary concepts, and we don't really have a good standard. Because just because you've been writing code for 10 years doesn't mean that you're necessarily a senior either. You can be writing code for 10 years but be doing the same thing. You could be only doing very basic WordPress stuff, or you could be I've got a friend who did mostly just forms, like for an insurance company. It just over and over and over for years and years and years. You're not learning anything new, you're not growing your skill, you're doing the exact same thing. So I would have a hard time calling somebody like that a senior developer, because even though they've got 10 years of experience, they don't really have a broad experience. They haven't really grown their experience. It's just tenure, right? And so I completely agree with you, Dan. I think we give that too early, and we hand it out probably often more based on pay. A lot of times companies update people's titles because they need to give them the next level raise, and they can't do that without giving them another title, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm right there with you with the Joomla stuff, Dan. I did Joomla and WordPress. Yep, we're old. The old Joomla, theme development and website building. Yeah, well, and that does kind of annoy me too. So you may not have thought of yourself as a developer. I do. If you're actually writing code, like if you're actually developing themes, actually developing plugins, to me, you're a real developer, because you're dealing with the framework, right? You're dealing with actual code. Whereas there are a lot of people who call themselves like WordPress developers, but really all they do is add plugins and themes and put them all together and make them work. That to me is not a developer. But if you're actually actively developing things and writing code to do stuff, I would call you a developer. Unfortunately, most of the market wouldn't give you a senior developer title, because unfortunately WordPress is just not thought highly of, which to me is, it's somewhat earned and it's somewhat not earned because of just the different types of developers that are out there for that. So but I've been in that boat. If you haven't heard my story, there, I think I've got a video called My Journey or something like that, or it's like a 16 years a junior or something like that, I think is the title of the video. Kind of my process of not really understanding where I was as a developer for years. So here's another post here from Robert McCabe, and he says, "Hello all. I have found a question. I have a question for any junior developers out there. When you get negative feedback on your projects from other developers, how do you handle it? I just had a developer on Discord take a look at my projects, and it was nice about it, but basically the gist of it was that my projects weren't good enough to get hired as a developer. Looking for some opinions and advice about this." Obviously, anybody that we look at, if you want to go follow them. If you want to respond to them, especially somebody like this who's looking for advice, or somebody who's looking for just some encouragement, check these people out and give them some encouragement, give them some kudos. So I don't want this just to be me talking about them. Go out and support these people, all right? So some thoughts on this. As I always say, take my advice with a very large grain of salt, because it's my opinion. Every developer is going to have their own opinion of what is professional and what is not professional. I actually just had a conversation with a friend of mine who's not a developer. He's built his own website and done some tweaks and things here and there, but he doesn't do this for a living. He doesn't build applications or websites or things like that for a living. And he had his resume on there, but it was using a weird font, and like there were things about it that just weren't great, weren't what I would call professional. And he was wrong. No, I'm just kidding. But one of the things that he said, he reminded me of, was, everybody's going to have different standards. Even the people who are looking at the resume and things like that from an employer standpoint, they're going to have different standards too. So you can't please everybody. And I would definitely take criticism with a grain of salt, especially depending on how the criticism comes. And I think there's a couple things that you could do in this scenario. And I don't know whether Robert did this or not, but one of the big things that you can do is follow up with questions. So when someone says your projects, he says, my projects weren't good enough to get hired, right? So a follow-up question for that would be something like, can you give me one or two things that specifically stand out to you as not being good enough, right? So try to get some specific information, try to get them to point out what it is they don't like. What I've found a lot of times is developers who are not designers as well, which is me and a lot of other people like me, those of us who are more devs than they are design, can tell you that it doesn't look right, but they can't necessarily always tell you why it doesn't look right. But if you can get somebody who can give you some feedback, maybe it is a functional thing, or maybe it is just a layout issue, or somebody who knows UI a little bit better, that can be really, really beneficial. Always, anytime somebody says something negative about what you're doing, try to turn it into a positive by asking questions that will help you grow and develop. That's the important thing. That's the advice that I would give to Robert here is, I would go back to the Discord channel, and I'd just ask questions and be like, hey, what are one or two things that would help me improve this to make this project something that is good enough. Another thing that I would suggest for Robert or for somebody else who's putting projects out there and asking people to take a look at them, a lot of times those projects are very simple. They're very much used by building tutorials and things like that. And so they tend to be very simple and not well thought out from an actual application standpoint. And so whenever you're looking at work somebody has done and it's very simplistic, that's not what companies are looking for. Companies want to see that you know how to use current frameworks. Companies want to see that you know how to use current standards. They want to see that you understand at least some basic design. That's why I generally recommend junior developers, if you're putting together a portfolio, if you're having people look at something, use a popular framework. Like for me right now it'd be Laravel. Use a Vue framework, or use a very simple React framework like MUI or something like that. Use something that's going to make it easy for you to build something that looks professional, that looks standard. I know a lot of times, even when I've taught people how to write code, basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, even the examples that I give them were very simplistic and they didn't look very good. And that's fine, especially starting out, because you're just learning how everything works. But one of the big things that companies are looking for is that you understand what good application development or what good website development looks like. Not just the functionality of building it, but can you build something that looks like a company today would want it to be their website, or would want it to be their application. So if you're trying to do something like that, I would encourage you to use a framework. Now, I am a huge proponent of learning the nitty-gritty details and doing the hard parts of learning, so that you understand why the frameworks are helpful, and don't just jump right into a framework. I think that's one of the problems with a lot of the way that development is taught right now. We kind of jump past a lot of that hard process to get to the easy stuff, and really you're not learning the things that help you understand why the framework is helpful. So I would say still work hard to learn the basics, but if you're going to put something out there, use something that's modern, use something that that companies are looking for in experience, because you'll also have experience in building that, and it's probably going to look a lot nicer. It's probably going to function a lot better than something that you build that's on your own, that's homegrown. So that would be another piece of advice that I would give to somebody like this who's getting this type of feedback from their work. So, all right, let's take a look at another one here. This one caught my eye just because it mentioned career change, and I know a lot of you guys are moving on from one type of work to another. I also was a transitioner back when I became a developer. I really didn't have any sort of like actual career when I started to be a developer. I started my career started off driving my car for like 14 hours a day. That back before Uber was a thing. That was again dating myself. But back before we had things like that, I was a courier, and I would carry messages from different companies to like their home base downtown, things like that. So I wasn't really moving from an actual career where I had built up a lot of experience and knowledge and things like that. So I didn't really bring anything into this. I had pretty simple jobs: courier, customer service representative, things like that. But even as an encouragement, it doesn't really matter where you're coming from. You can come from almost any career path into development. So that just caught my eye as I was kind of scrolling through some things earlier this morning and noticed the mention of career change. So I wanted to just read through this one quickly here. So it's like, here's what I've learned so far in trying to make a career change. I've been an electrician for the past 12 years. That's a long time to invest in a career and then decide you're going to jump back into a lot of learning. I know good electricians, they have a lot of learning that they go through too. There's a lot of hands-on learning that goes into being an electrician. And so there's a lot of investment that you're jumping from when you're going from an electrician to coding, not just the boot camp or the training process, but you're making an investment of your time and effort and energy to completely jump out of everything that you know into something else. So kudos to Mike here for doing that. But 12 years is a long time to have a good career, and I assume it was a good career, but then jumping out. Before that, I was military contractor, and I haven't had to do an interview or make a resume in over 20 years. Well, you're going to do it a lot as a developer, I can tell you that. The national average, it might be world average, I'm not sure, but I know at least in the United States, the average tenure for developer at a company is about 2 years, often even under 2 years. So this is going to be this is one thing that I think people making the change often don't understand or know about, is that you're going to be doing a lot of interviews, and you're going to do it somewhat frequently unless you just get into a really good position at a company that has a great mentoring program, has a great career flow, and treat their people well. I mean, there are opportunities out there like that, but most of the time you're going to see people changing jobs either voluntarily or involuntarily every couple of years in this market, so, or in this industry. So that's just something that I would tell Mike here, get used to this. So get used to your interviews and your resume. So definitely take note of what you need to do. All right. When I joined a boot camp earlier this year, I thought, let's see, when this 4 days ago, when I joined a boot camp earlier this year, I thought learning JavaScript would be the hardest thing about the experience. Yeah. A lot of people have that assumption. This is one of the reasons why I say I think lots and lots of people can learn to write code. There's more to being a developer than writing code, though. And so I think it's important that we help people who are getting into this career have that understanding that it's not, the code part is actually probably the easiest part. If you have a mind for learning it, if you have a mind for problem solving and things like that, that's going to be probably the easier part. But he continues on. He says, call it naivete or inexperience, but this networking and job hunting is by far the more difficult of the two. And honestly, this is more now than it used to be. So what you're experiencing here is not the way that it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago was much easier for somebody to get trained and get a job. But I don't know if it was just COVID or if it was people trying to just get people to pay them money to teach them how to code. Advertising, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but we have really flooded the market, and there's multiple parts of the problem. But this issue is not necessarily because he's naive or inexperienced. It's because the market is really dried up for junior developers. So one thing I would encourage Mike with is, yes, this is maybe the hardest part of being a developer, is finding your first role or finding your next role. But it's not because you're naive necessarily or inexperienced. It's just because right now that's not an easy thing for really most people, but especially junior developers. So I hear just reach out to your network. Before I thought that was like, my friends and family, right? Yeah, that's it. Especially if you're getting into something like an MLM or something like that, multi-level marketing, that your warm network, your friends and family, those are the people. But since I started trying to grow a proper network, I've met so many amazing individuals. They're smart, resourceful, talented, and open about their own experience. It all astounds me when I ask what is basically a complete stranger about their accomplishments and advice, how much they share with me. This is one of the things that I really like about LinkedIn, especially. So this is one of the reasons why we're doing this with LinkedIn, because there are so many people on LinkedIn um, making posts, making content specifically for junior developers, specifically for people trying to get into um, this this world of writing code and this new career, right? A lot of career transition, like we see even from Mike here. So, one things I do like about a lot of the online community is that there is a lot of help and resources and willingness to engage. One of the interesting things about the Laravel community, if you're not familiar with Laravel, that's a framework for PHP development. It's the one that I typically use the most. But they have a really really helpful and kind network of developers, and that's something that I've seen a lot, especially on LinkedIn. This is a great place to find help for junior developers, of people who actually want to help you. Now, honestly, there's going to be some people in here, they're really just looking for getting followers, or they're really just looking for trying to build up their YouTube channel, or they're really just trying to sell something, a course or something like that. There are people like that, and I'm not saying that they're wrong for pursuing those things. Obviously, I would love to build this channel. That would be awesome. But what I've found is that people are really helpful, especially here on LinkedIn, and I think that's what Mike's getting at here. You will get a lot of help if you just reach out. And that's another point that I want to point out from what he says here is he says, it astounds me when I ask was basically a complete stranger about their accomplishments and advice. Like, actually reach out to people. I know I maybe complained a little bit last Saturday when I made the announcement we were doing this. I said, I get a lot of people interacting with me and friending me on LinkedIn, and you can mostly tell what their agenda is if they have one, based on the title that they hold in their company. So a lot of times you can tell people are just trying to sell you something, but go ahead and reach out to people like me, people here on LinkedIn. Reach out to them and just feel free to ask if they can take 30 minutes, and you can ask questions. I've done that for multiple people, and sometimes I just don't have the time and I can't do that. Sometimes I do, and you just never know. So reach out and ask. There are lots of people that are out there that are willing to help you. Are you going to run into some that are all about them? Sure. But I think what Mike's experiencing here is pretty normal, and that's one of the reasons, again, I would encourage you, be on LinkedIn. This isn't the only place you should be, but I think this is not just a soundbite platform. I feel like Twitter's more of a soundbite platform, even though they do have some longer form content these days. It still feels very soundbite, and I don't know how much like interaction and help you're really going to get there versus LinkedIn. So I would definitely affirm what Mike's saying here. So I don't think he's interacted with me though, so the thank you is not for me. All right, let's jump over to the next one here. This one's a bit longer, and he's kind of setting you up for the next thing here. So again, this is one of those things where we hopefully will find some good information, but this guy may be a little bit more. I don't know. We'll see. We'll jump through it. We got something here from Dan. What do you think about pigeonholing in the job market regarding frameworks? It seems hard to break out from the framework you happen to start in. Jobs want 10 years in their specific framework. Yeah, I'm not a fan of pigeonholing. I think it's good to break out, but I also think that you should know what you're using. The reality is, once you learn one framework, whether that's especially front end and back end. So if you learn one front end framework and you learn one back end framework, it's not that they all work exactly the same, but the concepts are very much the same. They're very similar. You still have things like routing. You still have mostly model view controller configuration. You've got um, a lot of times ORM capabilities to be able to interact with databases um, and make those queries easier to write. So you're gonna run into a lot of the same stuff, just done a little bit differently from one framework to another. In fact, a lot of times frameworks are born out of other frameworks because they didn't like something the way that that framework particularly did something. So I would say focus less on knowing all the frameworks and more on understanding how to use frameworks. What is the benefit of a framework? How can it help you develop faster? Those are the things that I would suggest that you focus on, Dan, when it comes to frameworks. Because once you learn one, once you know how to use frameworks, it's pretty easy to jump from one framework to another. Are there going to be learning curves sometimes? Yes, but it's kind of like languages. Once you really learn a programming language, they all do largely the same things, just in different ways or with different syntax. So it's not the end of the world to jump from, for me to jump from like Vue to React. I started with Angular, actually was the first one that I learned. I feel like that was probably the most complex and hardest. And so then I moved to Vue, and Vue, I literally picked up Vue in a week. Partially because of what I already knew in the framework of Angular, there were similarities in Vue that made it easier to learn. And then React, I don't know, I wouldn't say that I actually learned React. I just started using it. Yeah, I had to look at documentation on things, but again, it was very similar to stuff that I had seen before. So once you have that experience, it makes it much easier to just jump in to new things and start using it. Moved from Laravel to Phoenix, and the gap was large. I've never even heard of Phoenix. I'll have to go look at it. Yeah, PHP to C Sharp is definitely less. They're very similar. Um, Elixir, yeah. I don't know. I've never used. Is that a function? Is Phoenix a functional? Uh, More of a functional framework? I don't know. I've never heard of it, which is odd because I've usually heard of most things, but at least heard the name before. Maybe I've not used it, but usually I've heard the name. I'll have to go check it out later. All right, so let's jump into this one. The importance of problem solving for software developers. Right. Okay. So it's okay. It's an Elixir framework. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So I don't know if I should even try to pronounce this name. Huzaifa Khalid. We'll go with that. Huzaifa Khalid. All right, the importance of problem solving for software developers. I've often observed that junior developers and interns, especially those trying to break into the market, tend to focus heavily on learning different skills, tech skills, frameworks, and libraries while neglecting the crucial skill of problem solving. Um, I would say that that is generally true. Um, but I would also say that that's generally necessary. You need to know the tools before you can use them to solve the problem, right? Like if you go to your garage and you are trying to um, hang a picture, right? Trying to hang a picture. You go to your garage, you look at your tools. If you don't know what the best tool is for hammering a nail, if you don't know what the tool is that you need to level the picture frame, if you don't know what the tools are, you don't know how to use the tools properly, um, the problem solving, your ability to problem solve won't be that helpful. So I think I am probably going to agree with most of what he has to say here, um, but I think, and while I do agree it's a crucial skill, you have to start with learning the tools. You have to start with libraries and frameworks and tech stacks and things like that, because those are the tools that we use, and you need to understand the tools before you know how to use the tools, and because you're only going to be a better problem solver if you understand how to use the tools that you are trying to use to fix the problem. I can hammer a nail with a wrench, but that doesn't mean it's the best thing. And it may take me longer to do that job because I'm using the tool wrong, or I'm using the wrong tool. So problem solving, while I may be able to think through problem solving, you got to know your tools first. And if you know your tools, then you can problem solve faster. That's my take. Anyway, they invest so much time mastering these tools that they overlook one of the most essential and foundational abilities every developer must possess. As a young and aspiring developer, it's important to realize that while having a good command of frameworks libraries is undoubtedly valuable, you can always learn these as you progress in your career. That is very true. So that's why, again, I typically say start with one language from a programming standpoint. So maybe that's JavaScript, or maybe that's one front end and one back end language, right? Get to where you are proficient in that. That doesn't mean that you have to be a senior level dev. That doesn't mean that you have to be have it completely mastered, but you need to be proficient. You need to be able to build a website, build an application with those tools. You need to know them well before you just jump into learning other things. Again, when you know a specific language, or when you know a specific framework or something like that, well, it's going to be easier for you to pick up other things. Now, like Dan was just saying a minute ago, sometimes there is a big gap just based on the difference in what it is that you're trying to learn. But generally speaking, once you have learned one, or learned two, learned front end and back end, once you've got the basics down and you're proficient in doing those things, you're going to be able to learn other things along the way. So I totally agree with the fact that you don't have to learn everything now. You need to learn to be proficient now. And part of that proficiency is going to be building your ability to problem solve, right? So he goes on, however, the time you could have spent honing your problem solving skills is something you cannot regain. You can't gain any time back. So like it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Whatever it is that you're not doing is something that you're not going to be able to get back. So, but I get his point, right? Unfortunately, many developers realize this too late, often end up struggling in their roles, or start facing difficulties securing new positions because their problem solving abilities aren't up to the mark. That's an interesting statement to me. I guess the question that I would have is, where is this coming from? So, like, I've been in some interviews where they will actually ask you problem solving questions, right? They'll give you, over the phone, they'll be like, hey, here's a problem solving question. Tell me what you think the answer is. Sometimes they'll ask you to even talk through your thought process as you're doing it, so they can kind of hear as you problem solve what it is that you're actually doing or thinking. But oftentimes, interviews don't necessarily specifically target problem solving. So I think that's another reason why so many people don't focus on problem solving, is because the interviews really often don't focus on problem solving. They might ask questions about how you have problem solved in the past, or problems that you've dealt with in the past, and how you worked with them, how you overcame them. But not, I would say less than 50%, probably even less than 30% of the interviews that I've been in, from my first interview till the interview to get me to this job that I'm currently at, I would say less than 30% probably had any sort of clear question specifically around problem solving. So maybe part of the solution for junior developers is to make sure that we're asking problem solving questions, not just saying, hey, spend your time doing problem solving, but emphasize that. And I don't know that it has to necessarily be, like hard problem solving, but just asking experiential questions in a way to find out how they go about problem solving. Asking follow-up questions to understand why they did certain things, to get their thought process, so you can understand how they interact with issues. I can't tell you how many times I've been in an interview and somebody asks a question like, tell me a time where you had to overcome, whatever, a problem, right? And so you give them, if you give them a very brief answer, they don't follow up. They don't try to often don't try to find out more information or try to understand what your thinking was as you went through that process. And so I think part of this issue that he's pointing out is also on the side of the employer and the people who are wanting that. If you're wanting somebody who's a good problem solver, then you need to talk about problem solving in some way in the interview. And frankly, in my experience, that doesn't typically happen very often. So your technical knowledge and frameworks listed on your CV may get you an interview table, but that will help you succeed in interviews. But what will help you succeed, in interviews and on the 9 to 5, on the job 9 out of 10 times is your ability to understand problems, break them down, get to the core issue, and come up with solutions that are not only feasible and scalable, but also efficient and direct. So this is the problem, right? This is really hard to evaluate in an interview. And that's one of the reasons why you don't see that in interviews very much. Because this takes time. The ability to understand problems, break them down, get to the core issue, and come up with solutions, that takes time. And then you add on top of that, that are not only feasible and scalable, but efficient and direct. I mean, sometimes solutions that are feasible, scalable, and efficient and direct are iterations. They're going to happen over time as you reevaluate the solution that you first came up with. So again, yes, I completely agree that problem solving is a huge part of what we do and very, very important. But again, it's not really part of the interview process. So it is something that is learned over time. And I think that's the thing where, some of these articles, again, why he's pushing for this as a learning thing is that it is something that takes time to learn. It's something that you learn through an iterative process. You learn how to get better at it by doing it more and more. And what I would say is the best way to do that is to do your learning and your practicing in such a way that you're also solving problems. So one of the things that I tell junior developers a lot of times is if you are learning a specific framework or you're learning a specific language and you're building applications, right? For example, I'm an application developer, right? So if you're building an application, don't just build a simple to-do list application. Think about a problem, whether it's a problem you have, a problem a friend has. Think about a specific, maybe it's not even a problem necessarily, but a specific type of project that is not just a simple to-do list. Give yourself a problem to solve and then use what you're learning to solve that problem. And you'll actually kill two birds with one stone. You'll be able to learn how to use that language or that framework, and you'll also be learning to problem solve along the way, because you'll be problem solving not just your thought process in fixing the problem or developing the application that you're wanting to do to meet the need that you're trying to solve, but you're also problem solving your learning process and your issues that you run into debugging your own code as you're learning how this language or framework works. So I would say you can still problem solve while you're learning. And to me, that's the key. It's not one or the other, it's both and. You need to be doing both of them at the same time. You need to be learning in such a way that you are problem solving. Once you get past the basic understanding of the tools, once you know what a hammer is and what a tape measure is and what a level is, once you have those pieces in place, then you can begin to use them to build something or to fix something, and then your problem solving gets included in that process. So I don't think it's an either or, I think it's a both and I think you need to think about that as you're going through it to make sure that you're not just doing mindless tutorial following, but that you're using your learning time to also increase your process of problem solving. So he says, my advice to all junior developers and to those entering the industry is this: focus on how you can sharpen your problem solving skills, especially at the start of your career. Over time, it will become second nature, right? Exactly. It will become second nature over time. It is just a part of the job. It's part of what we do. It's part of who we are, really. I think at the end of the day, developers are problem solvers. It's part of our nature. But it is also a skill that we have to develop, and it will develop over time as we continue to work and be challenged in this process. So Once it becomes a habit, problem solving will no longer feel like a challenge. As you gain experience, naturally, you'll improve. And then he talks about his next post. But this is, he's going to share specific steps in another post. I'll give you mine. Build stuff that causes you to think through it. That's mine. Yeah, exactly. Dan, it's too generic, right? LinkedIn is a place meant to market yourself, and it makes it professionally advantageous to give generic advice. Yeah, and that's again one of the reasons why I wanted to do this on LinkedIn is to go through that advice and give more specific advice, right? Let's expound on these things so that it's a little bit more helpful to people. Because you never know, there might be things that pop up in here that I haven't thought of or that you haven't thought of, and so I think that they can be beneficial. But it also it's a good thing to kind of think through. What is this person really saying? How can we improve on that, or how can we apply that? Maybe in a way that they haven't done, or that they or a different way than they have, right? And so to your point, like he hasn't really applied it yet. But I'll give you my application, right? It's build things that are going to make you think. Don't just build tutorials. So there you go. There's your answer. Boom. I did his next post for him. All right. We could probably go. Yeah, we got time for one more. All right. What was this one here? Okay, so this is from, I don't know how to pronounce this. Fullerin. We'll go with that. They're a designer and engineer. Quick advice: as a junior designer or developer, forget chasing that perfect job that might never come. Your real golden ticket: team up with your opposite number. This is interesting advice. I honestly haven't thought about this. So this is interesting, but I would agree completely with that first statement. In my opinion, I think you should try to find something that meets all your needs from a development from a financial standpoint, and time off and benefits and things like that, if you can. But you need to remember, there's not going to be a perfect job. There's no perfect company. There's no perfect developer. And so nary the two will meet. And so you're never going to have a perfect job. You're never going to have a perfect manager. Never going to have a perfect mentor. So don't look for that. Look for the best that you can get, especially if you're not forced into taking the first thing that you can get because of finances or other things. Then take your time and get the best that you can. But understand it's not going to be perfect. There's never a perfect job. And again, we go back to those statistics we talked about before. Every 2 years, roughly, most developers are either being let go, and hopefully not fired, but let go because multiple reasons. Companies fail, things like that. There's a lot of startups out there, or they just move on to a different opportunity. And part of that job hopping can happen because people think they're going to find a better situation. Are there better situations than others? Yes, but for the most part, I think you're going to find the majority of developer rooms are the same. The majority of jobs are going to be pretty much the same. You're doing the same thing. It just might be with a different language or framework or team. But development is very, very much the same across the board, at least in my experience, from job to job. So you're never going to find a perfect job. I completely agree. But this is an interesting take. Team up with your opposite number. Designers grab a developer. Developers find a designer. I've never thought about this before. I've had relationships with designers. I've had relationships with QA people. But this is a really interesting take that I think it's worth exploring. And I like what he says here. Is, trust me, the edge you'll get over other designers or devs who stick to their own bubble is insane. You'll be playing a whole different game while they're still figuring out the rules. So I do think it's interesting that my understanding of design grows the more I just hang out with and talk to designers. I am not in my opinion, I'm not very good at design. All you have to do is join the Deep Pockets project to see that I'm not very good at design for what we're doing there. But I'm not a designer, but I have grown in my design skills, not by reading tutorials, not by reading design books. I've grown in my understanding of a design by talking to designers, by interacting with designers, by looking at what designers do in the applications that I'm developing, that I'm working on, either at the job that I'm currently at or ones in the past. Same thing with QA. I understand how a QA person thinks a lot more, having spent time with them and talked to them and had them interact with me and walk me through bugs and things that I disagreed with them on as to whether it was broken or not. But I can see things from a different perspective, especially now in my current role where I do more QA of some of the work that others in the company are doing. I have a better understanding of that, and I can see things that I would not have caught 5 years ago, 10 years ago as a developer. Even though I had the skills to develop, I would not have seen those things. And even in my own development, I do feel like my development is better because I understand design more than I used to, because I understand QA and end user more than I used to. So I do think this is a pretty good take, in my opinion. And the only thing that I would say is I don't know how much this is necessary for a junior developer. Junior developers are very much focused, at least initially, on learning how to do the job, right? And I feel like some of these other aspects of design, QA, project management, all these other things that you can learn along the way, I think if you try to learn all that stuff right away, even working with someone else, I think it can be too much. It can be overwhelming. Now, if you're just picking up a project and you're collaborating, like he talks about here, it's painfully obvious when you're looking at work from a developer who's never collaborated with a designer. That is so true, right? So if you go back, let's go back over to this post here, to Robert's post, and we've got a screenshot here from somebody who left a note, right? And so they've got a screenshot here, and what I would say is I would bet that who is this? Robert. I would bet that Robert probably hasn't done any work with a designer. So I think the point that's being made is valid. I don't think you necessarily have to have deep conversations with a designer, but if you can work with somebody on a project who has design skills, who maybe handles the design side of the project while you handle the development side of the project, it will open your eyes to things that you wouldn't think of as a developer, right? Talking about my friend earlier and his website with his resume, I'm not a designer, he's not a designer, but I've worked with designers enough to know certain things about his website that just are going to turn people off, right? And so I was able to communicate that to him. Whether he takes my advice or not is up to him. But I didn't learn that anywhere. I just learned it because I've seen how designers design the projects that I worked on. So again, is this bad or wrong? Not necessarily, but it's very clearly not modern design, right? This is not going to be something that most people are going to look at and be like, oh yeah, I could definitely see, Pizza Hut building that. I don't know. It looks very simple. It looks like somebody who's learning is what it does. And that's, again, so one of the reasons why I said, I think it's good for junior developers when they're putting portfolios out to use frameworks. Use a framework, use a front-end framework, use a CSS framework, something like MUI, right? Especially most of you are probably doing React anyway. Use something that is popular, that has documentation, it's easy to implement, because it's just going to look professional out of the gate. And you'll get used to seeing what professional looks like, right? You'll get used to recognizing when it looks professional and when it doesn't look professional. And so even if it's not working directly with a designer, you can sort of get the same interaction by simply using some of those CSS frameworks and and or even themes. Sometimes you could get like a template or something like that that will give you lots of different, not necessarily functionality, but views and design elements and things like that that are designed to work together. Take advantage of those things, not to cheat the system and make yourself look like you know more than you do, but take advantage of them to help you kind of learn by osmosis, so to speak, what good design looks like. And as you begin to see that more and think through that more, whether you're working with a designer or you're working with a template or something like that, it's going to become ingrained in you what looks good and what doesn't look good, and you'll just kind of begin to fall into some of the habits of design. And yeah, that's going to change over time to some degree, but that interaction with either a designer or with a template or something that's been designed well, it's going to over time have an influence on how you view design. And the same thing about other aspects of development, whether it's project management, whether it's managing your code base, whether it's doing QA on your code base, and just what to think through when you are actually testing your own tickets, your own work. Knowing how QA people do it will change things that you think about. Maybe you never think about form validation, and until you start actually like QAing your own work, or have somebody QAing your work, and they keep talking about how you need to add form validation. Well, eventually you get to a point where form validation is just part of what you do in building forms, whether that's front end, back end, however you end up doing it. You tend to just pick those things up over time. So I think to assume that a junior developer should do this right out of the gate, I don't know, again, if that's if that specifically is necessary. But I think you can get that whether it's with a designer, or you can get that whether it's with like a templating system or a CSS framework or something like that, that'll at least help you begin to see in your own work good design, good layout, things like that. So, but I do think, I hadn't really thought about it before, but I do think the advice is sound, that you're definitely going to show a higher level, at least from an interview standpoint, from a profile, from a not profile, what am I thinking of? Portfolio standpoint. You're definitely going to stand out if you've spent time at least considering design and either working with the designer or template or something like that. You are gonna have better looking projects. And as much as I wish we could just look at code and be like, hey, you're a great developer because you write clean code, at the end of the day, people are more interested in what things look like and how they work than how nice your code is. So I would definitely say this is good advice. Do what you can to work with designers, or take advantage of good design in the projects that you work on. So that actually worked out pretty well time wise. You never know how these things are going to go when you do the first one, but hopefully this has been interesting to you. Again, we'll be back here next Thursday. Thursday, not next Thursday, but this coming Thursday. We'll be back here on Thursday at 1 p.m. Live, looking at more new things. If you have somebody you think I should follow to take a look at their posts, if you have specific posts you'd like me to review, if you have posts of articles or things like that on LinkedIn that you'd like me to review and comment on, send them over to me either in the Discord server as a comment on this video, or some other way. I think those are the two main ways you can connect. You can send them to me in LinkedIn if you want to. My LinkedIn is in the profile or the About Me section of the YouTube channel. So thanks for jumping on here. Those of you who were able to jump in, Marcelo, is it Marcelo or Marcelio? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm going to go with Marcelo. Hello from Brazil, and see ya. Jumped in at the end here. Maybe we'll make it next time. We'll see. Dan says the best advice I could ever give a junior developer is find a mentor who has experience in the industry. That is why I like what you're doing on this channel. Exactly. I mean, well, thank you. but yeah, at the end of the day, you want a mentor, especially somebody who you can interact with on a regular basis. I mean, I love doing this. I hope that it's helpful for people, but you need somebody more than me too. You need somebody that you can interact with. And I'd love for more senior devs to jump into the Discord channel so that junior devs can jump in there and ask questions as well. I'd love for that to be a place where you can get some of that as we grow, hopefully over the coming years. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think mentorship is the key, because you're gonna get even some of the stuff around design and QA and things like that. You're gonna pick that up from a mentor as well as they're interacting with you. So totally agree. Mentoring is exactly the main thing. A good mentor, somebody who's there, who's going to be able to be there, and you have to be able to interact with them well and consistently too. So anyway, a little bit over time. I'm going to try to cut it off a little bit earlier on Thursday, because I've got a meeting in a few minutes. So there you go. So thanks everybody for jumping on. Hope to see you all again on Thursday. If you're available, I'll see you here at 1 p.m. Central United States time. And have a great day. If I can find my logo to transition to. There we go.